Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is brought to you by the Dude Ranchers Association and Golden Wings Horseshoes and produced by Cowboy Spirit USA. Have you been wondering where America is headed? Well, you're not alone. It's a question many of us are asking these days, especially as we head into the July 4th holiday. Joining the Cowboys is Judge Michael Warren, who has some interesting thoughts to share about where we've been and where we're going.
Well, Alan, good morning. How are you?
One more week. Always glad to be here at your ranch. I drive in here and see the horses and saw a bunch of people horseback when I drove in, and it brings me a little closer to home. So it's a feel-good time when I come here.
Yeah, we've got an outside group. They're doing all kinds of stuff today, and you like our new surface on our old road. Yes,
my whole life, a lot of my chores are making ranch roads passable. And quick story, I bought a ranch in South Dakota one time, and the big knock on the ranch was great ranch and no access. So about my first year on the ranch, I spent working on the road, and I found a caliche pit that had caliche, in the dirt.
Normally a dirty word.
Caliche. Yeah, but it's a good road coating because it's hard and, kind of like putting hard gravel. So spent about a whole year fixing up the road to the ranch and increased the value of that ranch almost double by getting access. So
wow.
Sometimes ranching has different faces.
It's like everything, I guess. Well, anyway, today we've got Judge Michael Warren. He served on the Oakland County, Michigan Circuit Court. He has served since 2002, former member of the State Board of Education of Michigan. He and his 10-year-old daughter, Leah, are the co-founders of Patriot Week. That's www.patriotweek.org. Always remember org. He is the author of America's Survival Guide, How to Stop America's Impending Suicide by Reclaiming Our Founding First Principles, and that is www.americassurvivalguide.com. He's the host of Patriot Lessons, American History and Civics podcast, and I'm going to be a listener just knowing the topic. It's right square in my bullseye for sure. Judge Warren was also honored as the Judge of the Decade in 2019 by the International Association of Top Professionals. We're just really happy to have you here, Judge. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it is my thrill to be on this show as well. I really appreciate you having me on, Russell and Alan. And talking about the roads from the Midwest, the roads in Michigan are awful. So maybe you guys can come out and help us fill some potholes in. Talking about access, boy, we've got some problems.
I've done some of that.
Well, Alan used caliche, which if you don't know caliche, it's just this naturally occurring, basically it's natural concrete. And we used reclaimed asphalt to resurface our road. And so we're doing it ranch style. We're not quite doing it like the government might. Anyway.
I suspect yours will last longer than what the government's doing out here. So.
I know it'll cost a lot less.
Yeah, that's right. The main thing is when you get potholes so big that you break a spring, you got to do something.
Exactly.
Well, what's the inspiration? I mean, for your book, let's talk about America's Survival Guide, How to Stop America's Impending Suicide by Reclaiming Our Founding First Principles.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I have been a history student for a long time, and also been very engaged in looking about our civil society and the state of affairs that we're in. And I truly have become panicked over, the direction of our country. And When I wrote the book and it was published about 10 years ago, most people were scratching their heads and said, you know, what do you mean? We had the strongest nation in world history, this phenomenal military, the strong economy. How can we be at risk? And my response is, well, wait a minute. We are strong enough to stop any outward threats, but our biggest threat is internal. If we do not understand and unite around our founding first principles from a Declaration of Independence and understand our Constitution, that our country is going to be in grave threat of self-destruction. And now people are not scratching their heads anymore. I'm getting people coming up to me and say, well, I don't exaggerate, but say you prophesized what was going to happen with the state of affairs in the country. And I'm not trying to be partisan in any way. I just think we realize that we have a very difficult circumstance that we're facing. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that we have people that either don't care about our foundations in history, don't understand them, or really despise the great freedoms and liberties that we have. And obviously that's tremendously concerning. And I'll quote from a part of the book. I quote Abraham Lincoln, who said, "At what point is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if there's ever to come to us, it must spring from among us. It cannot come from overbroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide." And if you look at recent polling that we've had, the public in general, there was a Gallup poll that shows that patriotism has fallen off a cliff, that that many Americans do not believe in the country anymore. They don't believe in our founding enduring values. And if you look at our civics and history scores in our country, they've also fallen off a cliff for our K through 12 students and our university students. And we're fools to think that we can survive as a free people if we don't understand the foundations of our country. So, I have a family. I want them to live in a free country, enjoy the blessings of liberty. And that was part of my motivation. But everybody needs to acknowledge and take kind of a step back, a deep breath, and say, hey, we have this phenomenal country, the best in the course of human history, and we need to preserve it and protect it as opposed to tear it down.
Is there a driving force behind this, or are we our own worst enemy? Are we driving it ourselves? And is it just a movement that has its own life?
Fantastic question. There's been generational changes that have, I think, been seriously contributed to this. Some of it, I would say, as a free people, we're in charge of our own destiny. So, despite what we're hearing about UFOs and all that stuff, I think, we're still in charge of our freedoms and liberties. And so we're responsible. And, I would say that there's some folks, if you go back like 100 years, to the progressive era, the original progressive era, there were folks that, really started to denigrate teaching American history and civics, saying that was not important, that we should kind of turn over to elite bureaucrats the governance of the country, that the people don't really need to be involved all that much. We got these great elites that can make sure everything goes forward correctly. So there's the kind of that movement. There's also been a movement and it reappears in many currents and threads in American history, but, there were anarchists and communists and fascists, and I'm not sure what we call the people today, but the folks that really, projects like the 1619 Project, where they say that America's built on racism, the critical race theory, which is all about challenging the foundations of our country not being just. And clearly we've had major problems in our country. I'm not trying to downplay those. But there are now people that are actively attacking the whole grand experiment of liberty that we've been able to live with and been able to prosper under. And they want to tear it down, and their replacement is that, they think they know what's best and want to impose their views on the rest of us. So and I think there's also been a lot of complacency where people have been, kind of living on the success of prior generations, not realizing how unique we are. We've had the collapse of the Soviet Union, and even with the war on terror, there really wasn't an existential threat anymore against us. So we kind of coasted and kind of just assumed everything would go great. And it's not. And so I think there's a whole slew of different currents that are pushing the country over the cliff, I feel a better term.
The thing that upsets me the most, and Alan and I share the old saying, right? Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And any of the different versions of that same theory that history's just critical. It's not just something to entertain yourself in college. But to me, whether you use fascist or this term or that term, and of course they love to throw these terms around at people politically, but really what I see is totalitarianism in whatever name you want to attach to it. The thing that upsets me most, and I think it's in the absence of appreciation of history, is the gross shrinkage of freedom of speech. And, I just, it's really easy to think that people shouldn't say something when you don't like it. And who was it that said, the speech we must protect is one we like the least, or whatever version of that? But the shrinkage, I just read 2 or 3 headlines today about people losing jobs and not getting to graduate high school because they said something. It didn't threaten anybody, but it was politically unacceptable or politically incorrect. How do you view this? It just seems a widespread movement to shrink and virtually strip us of that First Amendment.
Russell, I think you're exactly right. What we have now is a movement to try to silence and intimidate and harass people into only following the I'll call it the woke or the far left progressive line about how they should treat people. And what's so bizarre about it, or ironic about it, is that back in the 60s, when conservatives wanted to suppress that kind of radical speech, the left speech, they ran to the First Amendment, demanded that they be heard, protected their rights, and in turn protected everybody's rights. And that was the Berkeley free speech movement, which is wonderful. And now that they have gained ascendancy in a lot of places in our culture, they're abandoning free speech and doing the same kinds of things that they opposed back in the 60s.
They need to dust off those bumper stickers they had during George W.'s term, where it said "Dissent is patriotic."
There you go.
Do you remember that one? It was all over, and they really need it because dissent is patriotic.
Absolutely.
Well, I have a question. I'm not disagreeing with what you've outlined, but I want you to paint a map for me about where we're going, where the people that are pushing this want to take us. I want to see the end product, please.
So, on a broader scale, I don't want to talk about specific people, but on a broader scale, I think the forces of history have always been against liberty and freedom. There is this almost innate desire of people in power to oppress other people and to impose their will on the people, the rabble, those that are not worthy. And you've seen that through the course of all of human history. You go back to ancient Rome, you go back to China, ancient China, and look today in Cuba and North Korea and Iran. That impulse is always there. And America has been an exceptional nation in the first one that was built on these principles. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That when any form of government becomes obstructed with these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to establish new government, laying its foundations as principles and organize its power such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Those words from the Declaration of Independence were revolutionary in 1776, and they remain revolutionary today. And we have all these forces now that, back even in our worst days, people, even during the Civil War, people would say, we believe in those words in the Declaration of Independence. They disagreed on how they applied, right? Equality didn't apply to African Americans and slaves and all that. But they believed in the principles. And now what's happening is people are attacking those principles. Really, there are people now that don't believe in equality. There are people out there that don't believe in the rule of law. They don't believe in rights coming from God. They believe the government should dole out privileges as opposed to their subjects as opposed to citizens. So if we stay on this course, I think that we will go through a tremendous, the book has got the title because I think there are people that want us to commit suicide, and we'll end up lurching into either an authoritarian society, or we'll lurch into a socialistic, you mentioned earlier, totalitarian, something close to that. America is the last great beacon of hope of the world for liberty, and a lot of people want to tear it down. And the thing I didn't mention before was, like the Chinese and the Russians. If I was I could not write a better script for the Chinese and the Russians to say, how do we kill America? Well, first, let's have them doubt themselves. Let's have them spend all this time and energy fighting amongst each other and tearing each other apart and dividing the country up into little identity politics kinds of things, and dismiss their uniqueness and exceptionalism and their belief in the Declaration of Independence and their Constitution, and have them not teach history and civics, or when they do, they teach it with self-flagellation and guilt, because then it will just fall apart, and that's what's happening.
To your point, a headline this morning, poll says 1/3 of Generation Z is proud of being an American, proud of this country. 1/3. Of course, the other side of that coin is 2/3 don't.
Yeah.
Right.
To your point.
Yes. Exactly.
Well, where are we headed with this?
Alan, we're going to take a real quick break. We're over as often we do, and then we'll be right back with that question.
Good.
Today's episode is brought to all of you in part by the Dude Ranchers Association. This is the group that since 1926 has been providing the original Western adventure vacation. I always say it was the West's first destination vacation. It's summer. It's sort of the golden time for dude ranches and families. And of course, really up in those pine-covered Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, Idaho, all those great summer destinations. Arizona, of course, year-round destination also. But it's a great place to get out there and do all that Dude Ranches offer pretty uniquely, really. Of course, my 5-year-old Reagan, she already is, she was out on the breakfast ride on Saturday with her grandparents, loved it. And, there's no better way ever to see the country than on horseback. You don't like horses? Hiking's good too. Not quite as good, but pretty good. Some ranches have UTVs, ATVs, e-bikes, mountain bikes. I was just at Averill's. They had these fantastic mountain bikes. There's archery, shooting, whitewater rafting for the ranches near rivers, but always centered around that special brand of Western hospitality. It was really interesting. When I was at Averill's, I was there for their, orientation for their 100 staff. And they just really talked about hospitality and what it means and how you do it. And how you do it at a dude ranch is different. And of course, food is all included, and you can't get better food than that's been cooked out on the range. 90 plus ranches have gone through the pretty extensive process to be approved to be part of duderanch.org. And that's the place you go to find that ranch vacation. They've done the selections for you. If there's still too many to choose from, give them a call, email them at duderanch.org. All the information's there. And you can go, as they like to say, go find your inner cowboy. And Alan.
Well,
I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It was probably a good thing you did. No, I want to see what our destination point is. Where would you take us to put us in a better place? What will it look like?
Right. So thank you, Alan, for that question. What we need to do is reinvigorate the spirit of America by having our countrymen and women re-embrace our founding first principles and our history, to acknowledge the flaws that we've had in the past, to celebrate the accomplishments that we have made, and to continue to be even a brighter beacon of hope and liberty for the world. And the only way that we're going to get there, I believe, there's a lot of ways that we've kind of gotten to this problem, and there is no silver bullet that you do one thing and all of a sudden everything is fine. The book lays out a number of different arenas of the last chapter, things that we can do. But I'll highlight two. First is that I think we really need to start teaching our history in an honest way that acknowledges our exceptional nature and teaches our Declaration of Independence and Constitution, not just kind of as afterthoughts or at the end of the senior year or, a few weeks here and there, but something that every year we return to with our students at their particular level. So start in kindergarten all the way until they're 12th graders, so that people understand our history and civics and our Constitution, our founding first principles and Declaration of Independence, and embrace them. That would do a lot.
Judge, do I remember correctly, you're involved in iCivics? Because Alan's sister Sandra was involved in that.
Yeah, iCivics is a great program. I'm not particularly involved, although I've been I always like to point them out as a great group.
So you like it?
Tremendous resources, absolutely. The other thing that I've particularly been involved in is called Patriot Week, and Patriot Week was started when my 10-year-old daughter pounded on a table and demanded a new celebration for America.
Good for her.
Yes, absolutely. What happened was I was having a one-on-one lunch with her at a Japanese steakhouse, and I was reflecting on how when I was a kid, my father's a disaffected Jew. He's an atheist, and my mother is a disaffected Catholic, and I was raised as nothing. And he would say, "Mike, you can believe anything you want, just remember it's all baloney," although my dad used a stronger term. And so I started as an atheist and became an agnostic. And then, of all places, in Ann Arbor, in Michigan, at law school, the Holy Spirit found me, and I converted to Catholicism basically overnight, much to the shock of my family and friends. And I called my little Italian grandma and said, "Grandma, you're going to take me to church this weekend." And she went, "Michael?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "Is this a joke?" I said, "No, really." And so I ended up taking some religious formation education classes, and because that's what you have to do when you're an adult. And I learned about the liturgical calendar. So Easter, Pentecost, Advent, all the great religious Christian holidays, and everybody, all the other major religions have this too. Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims, they all have this idea of stopping the hustle bustle of the day and to renewing your faith. And I realized that, as an American, we used to have the same kind of thing. We had Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday, Memorial Day, Independence Day, Thanksgiving, Armistice Day. Why? To stop in the hustle bustle of the day to renew our faith in America. When we declared independence, John Adams wrote to his wife Abigail that the anniversary of that day would be forever celebrated with bells and bonfires and speeches and games and illuminations in the sky from one end of the continent to the other, now and forevermore. And he was right. We still have 4th of July. It's coming up pretty soon. We got Flag Day down the, coming up too. But he said it also should be a solemn day of devotion for the blessings of liberty. Now, I don't know about you, but last time I had a hot dog at a 4th of July party was not a particularly solemn occasion. And we've really ruined our civic calendar. Washington's birthday, Lincoln's birthday, we've squished them together so that we can celebrate all the presidents, including, Benjamin Harrison and Zachary Taylor. And what do? We get appliance sales and carpet sales. Memorial Day used to be the day that we would decorate the graves of those who'd given their last full measure of devotion during the Civil War, and it's now turned into an empty excuse for a 3-day weekend to have barbecues and, again, more appliance sales. So I was explaining this to my daughter Leah, and she got very upset, pounded on the table, and demanded a new celebration for America. So what we've done is we've taken being I guess not so humble. We decided we're going to do a whole week. We picked 9/11 because at the time it was still pretty raw and people were struggling with what to do with that date. And 9/17 is the anniversary of the signing of the Constitution. And so we have those anchor dates, and every day we celebrate a founding first principle from our Declaration of Independence, such as the rule of law, inalienable rights, limited government, the social compact, equality, revolution, key people and figures like Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Martin Luther King Jr., Elizabeth Cady Stanton, that represent those first principles, documents that embody those, like the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the I Have a Dream speech, and then flags from our history, which also are emblematic of each of those things. And we've had parades, paloozas, festivals, picnics, panel discussions, gubernatorial debates, all kinds of fun activities that hopefully get people to refocus on civics and history. And we have a podcast, you mentioned it earlier, the Patriot Lessons, American History and Civics. We have a TV show called Patriot Lessons that's on our website at patriotweek.org, along with the podcast. Lesson plans, lots of interesting materials for people to learn more about our country and why we should be. I don't like to use the word pride because pride's it's the worst sin, but why people should be excited to live in America and want to defend our freedoms and liberties. And so that's been going on for 14 years. It's bipartisan and really nonpartisan. We have lots of Democrats and Republicans and independents and business folks and religious leaders and elected officials who are all involved in the effort. And so that's another way to combat what's going on with the collapse of our enduring founding first principles and our history is to renew our civic calendar. But it's hard to get people excited about the old holidays, so we created a new celebration for America. And that's another way to combat what's going on in our country.
And so I'm understanding that beside the week, which is 9/11 through 17, patriotweek.org is also a place that they can learn about Patriot Lessons, American History and Civics, the podcast, and your book. And how often does your podcast come out? I assume it's like ours. It's out there for access on all the platforms.
Yeah. So you can go to all the platforms, and we've got more than 70 episodes. We try to get one out at least once every month. For a while we were doing it biweekly, but then I made the mistake of running for a higher office, which completely disrupted our schedule. So we're getting back on track. But we've gone through every sentence of the Declaration of Independence and explained them, which a lot of people don't know about. We've had special episodes. We just did one on Memorial Day. We have had them on different holidays and different people. And right now we're going through every provision of the Constitution. So we're deep in Article 1, which is the one that establishes the Congress. And I'll have to say, the Founding Fathers were truly brilliant. I didn't even know how brilliant they were until I was really digging into this part of the podcast. For those of you that are interested in the Constitution or the Declaration or just history in general, I hope it's a valuable resource. So nobody's doing it. We also will have fun with it. We have because it's entirely scripted. So I do a bunch of research, and then we quote a lot of the Founding Fathers and other folks that were involved, and we do voices. So it's a little entertaining. I have got a pretty good Southern draw down now in South Carolina. I get all the South Carolina figures, but it's not just kind of somebody rambling on. We try to make it entertaining. And
the TV show.
Yeah, so the TV show is more like what we're doing right now. Usually I have a guest on, and we talk about either a hot topic or something from our history or part of our Constitution. I've also had book reviews and authors and other kinds of folks that are involved in making patriotic art and stuff like that. So it's a wide range of different issues. Some of the you can see my daughter grow up because we started it many years ago, and so she's little, and then she gets taller through some of the episodes. Now she's off because she's in medical school. But it's a lot of the episodes have like trivia and fun little segments, media reviews. Somebody watches the movie The Patriot, for example, or some other movie, or read a book and they talk about it. So it's a mishmash of different things. More recently, it's been the interview format.
And where do you get that?
You can go to thepatriotweek.org, and there's a resource page where you can watch any of the episodes. It's also on I'm forgetting Vimeo.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hosted by Vimeo. Yeah.
Perfect.
You have another book on the drawing boards, is that correct?
That is correct. So as I was going through the Declaration of Independence, which I think is our most important document and the least understood document of our foundational documents, I'm taking that, the podcast, and flipping them into a book. And I say a book, it's really long now, so it's going to be at least 2 volumes, probably 3. But no one that I can find in the last, call it 120 years, has actually gone through the whole Declaration and published a work about it. So obviously there's been a lot of historical resources that didn't exist back then, and some of them, the older books, are pretty superficial. So I'm hoping to create the definitive guide to the Declaration of Independence.
And your main audience is?
For the book, or for?
Yes. For the book,
yeah.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is, it would be very academic, the long version, but then I'm going to take it and do what I guess you'd call an abridged version, and that would be for that would be for the masses, high school students, college courses, those kinds of things. The 3-volume would be more academic for universities and those that are true history buffs and really want to understand this document. But,
any idea when either of those are? I assume the 3 volume will be first and the abridged will follow, or?
Well, I'll probably do so my thinking right now is I'm writing the 3 volume, and I will then the abridged would come out relatively quickly after.
Right. And how far out are they?
I would say a good year. Okay. Unfortunately, because of
3 volumes.
How seriously I'm taking it. Right. So, and I have a real job. If I could, I still have to adjudicate cases and write opinions and all that kind of stuff as well.
So I had a question for you, and you answered it. I was going to actually ask you which of our documents you thought was the most important. You answered that, the Declaration. Yeah. So, different subject. I'm reading Robert Kennedy Jr.'s The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, and Big Pharma, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through. It's made me very, very angry. And I'm sure it's not completely accurate, although I've never seen so many footnotes in my entire life, which could be a smokescreen. But it's really interesting where this lifelong Democrat from obviously the biggest name in that political party is so upset about the I don't know what word you'd use, collusion between big government and big corporate America, billionaires, to lie to us, to suppress First Amendment rights, to shape messages. It's a book on point. Have you read it?
I have not read it. I've read reviews of it, and since I haven't read it, I really can't offer much on its veracity or not. But I guess what I would say on a larger point is that I think it's pretty clear that there are. I'll put it a different way. I think our citizens need to be extraordinarily vigilant in this time, and we're not.
Well,
Who's a well-known figurehead that agrees with you? That us commoners can look to and tag on with. Give me a name.
That's a great question.
That is a great question. So, I don't want to put words in people's mouths that I haven't talked to. Okay, so we have an advisory board, and all those folks love what we're doing, and they're all pretty much Michigan based. But on the national level, the Federalist Society is something I've been involved with heavily for a long time, which is a group of libertarian and conservative lawyers. And out of that group, or directly, or folks that have been aligned with them, include several Supreme Court justices. So Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, those folks all come out of this perspective of, and again, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I very much agree with their jurisprudence and how they evaluate the Constitution, and their skepticism towards government power, and their commitment to the rule of law and reining folks in. So those would be some leaders on the legal side that I think would be extraordinarily important to support and to read up on their views.
And we got to wind up, but that book I was talking about, Kennedy's book, it confirmed my belief that the COVID virus grossly accelerated an effort toward big government and concentration of control, whether it's the mayor or the county commissioners or the governor. What we ended up getting was a bunch of dictators, totalitarianism, I believe, where the virus certainly was an emergency. There should have been emergency powers briefly, and then we should have followed through with bipartisan, our federal system of government and the division of powers and all the things that we seem to have forgotten. Do you agree that COVID really accelerated the move toward concentration of power?
I think you'd have to be blind to reality to not understand that there were unprecedented consolidation of power throughout the country, both in governors as well as, so state level, I guess I'd put, as well as on the federal level. And we can have, years long debate, I'm sure is going to happen about some of the nuances and whether particular decisions were appropriate or not. But I do, it is pretty shocking how complacent so many people were in connection with that. I do not think that would have been the case years ago. So again, this kind of this mentality of not knowing your rights, not appreciating that they come from God, and that instead of looking to the government to control what you do, but instead, understanding that you are the center of and have the responsibility and accountability to protect your liberties and freedoms. A lot of that has been washed out and forgotten, or people hold it in disdain. And there's what's happened in COVID, I think, is proof positive of that.
So how do you go forward with carrying your message and put it into day-to-day practice? What can I change in my life to show support of what you're saying?
Right. So a number of things. I would say, first off, help get Patriot Week off the ground in your state. We've had 17 states recognize it over the course of several years, so we're always looking to have more at it. And jump on patriotweek.org, share those lesson plans with students, with homeschoolers, with your local schools. And it is nonpartisan, so there's no issue with, we're trying to funnel in, right-wing or left-wing ideology. Learn about your rights through my book, America's Survival Guide, or the Future Declaration books, and to when you have, I think we all now have this amazing ability to convey your message through social media in a way that we never had before. And so, on the other hand, showing up at meetings and signing letters and all that still works too. So I would just say, don't be complacent. Don't let other people, leave it to other people, because there aren't any other people. It's up to us to keep our freedoms. And my personal view has been, I'm trying to focus. There's so much out there, you can't possibly cover everything. So to pick something that really grabs your attention and become an expert on it and be diligent about that. And I think that's what we didn't have, in what I call it the COVID era, where there just weren't a lot of experts out there other than the people that were in control.
Right.
And so everybody just said, okay, well, I guess we need to wear these masks. And then they tell us later, no, you didn't need to wear the mask. Well, what happened? So that would be my suggestion. Find something that really, piques your interest, that you can become an expert in. Monitor the situation. When something awry happens, speak up, be involved, talk to your local representatives, your local council members. And for what it's worth, I mean, I'm not blind to the fact that I'm a judge, and so people pay attention to that. But I know a lot of activists out there that they're highly effective because they're willing to spend a couple of hours a week or a month to go to a meeting and meet with people and express their opinion, and they have an effect.
A friend of mine used to say the world is run by those who show up, but we've gone way over. Is it, I'm a grandpa-aged father of a 5-year-old, and increasingly, so this goes right to my core is education, and I think there's a lot of people who, for reasons that we've discussed today, are concerned about the absence of what you're teaching, and so www.patriotweek.org is a place that all of your wide-ranging efforts can be located. Is that a fair statement, Judge? PatriotWeek.org. Okay.
Yeah, we don't really promote the book necessarily on that, so I would say you can America's Survival Guide. You can americasurvivalguide.com, or you could go to
any of them, Amazon or whatever, sure,
wherever, right?
So that's at americasurvivalguide.com.
Right.
Well, thank you so much.
I appreciate you being on with us today.
Well, it's my pleasure, Russell and Alan. I really appreciate it. God bless you, and God bless America.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Alan and I always want to thank Fred and everybody at Golden Wings Horseshoes for sponsoring our Cowboy Up podcast. These revolutionary horseshoes are like no other. And as they like to say, and I know, horses love them. They're made from a special non-metal compound. It took Fred 10 years to come up with it. I always ask him, what is it made of? Oh, I don't know. Well, okay, that's a kind way of, it's proprietary, and it should be. Took 10 years to get there. They're comfortable for horses because they absorb concussion and they are flexible. And, the big negative to putting metal horseshoes on horses, and you got to do it, despite what some people believe, some territory needs shoes. And, of course, metal doesn't flex. These do. They flex up and down and in and out. And when a horse's foot hits the ground, the ability to expand out is really healthy for the inner structures of the horse's hoof. I can absolutely, without hesitation, testify that these horseshoes, Golden Wings horseshoes, have helped a lot of our horses. Some are only on the trail because of them. And, of course, I told the story, I think, a month ago that Barb is winning buckles on her mounted shooting horse that had been retired until Golden Wings came along and put him back into competition. We have horses that were out of commission, and they're back on the all-day 18, 20-mile rides. So go to Golden Wings, plural, goldenwingshorseshoes.com, goldenwingshorseshoes.com. And they'll get there. And Fred, they're fast. They'll get the shoes right to you. And your horseshoe is going to be your new biggest fan because they're so easy to put on. I think I've told this story on the podcast before. A friend of mine moved to a rural area of North Carolina, and she put up an American flag. She's a, by the way, naturalized citizen. And she and her husband put up their American flag, as they did wherever they've lived in the U.S. And two neighbors came over in the first 2 weeks, and one said, "Oh, great to see a Trumper in the neighborhood," and the other one came, "Oh no, not another Trumper in the neighborhood." And I thought at the time, what a tragic thing that is, that flying the American flag made you a Trumper. And I blame him a little for that. And I think that, it's in more of the media that the American flag is associated with a person and a political philosophy. And what Judge Michael Warren is doing is so unbelievably important because, as he pointed out, the attempted suppression of freedom of speech during the Vietnam protest era, the Berkeley free speech movement, he supports that. I support that. You know, as they say, the speech we need to protect is the stuff we don't like to hear. And it's so important what Judge Michael Warren's doing because he puts all those rights that we have and why we needed them and how we got them and what makes America, use the word several times, and I agree, and some people are offended by this, it makes America exceptional. And he's helping remind us why.
Well, I wish it could be put forward more forcefully so that more of us could tack on to it and attach to it, because I think a huge majority of people subscribe to it, but it's not a real active go forward place to ride, you know, to attach to. And that makes me wonder how we can frame it in a better way to make it more something we want to attach to.
Go Judge.
Go Judge.
Hey, we appreciate you being with us today. If you'd like to share your thoughts about our State of the Union, founding principles, civics, or anything else, email us at thecowboyuppodcast@gmail.com. That's thecowboyuppodcast@gmail.com. Hats off to Stan Houston's production team. Next week, we dig into some Grand Canyon history with Melissa Savani, author of the new book, Brave the Wild River. Be sure to tune in. Until then, I'm Lynn Weezy Sneed, reminding you to sit tall in that saddle and ride safe.